right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Why don't you come up sometime, see me?
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
The stuff that dreams are made of.
Hi, Wendy here. Before we start off our episode today, I want to remind everybody to check us out on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. Also, please leave a rating or comment on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. You can find us on social media by simply searching Silver Screen Time Machine, and please make sure you follow our podcast, Silver Screen Time Machine, anywhere you get your podcast. Thank you, and enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome again to Silver Screen Time Machine, Wendy's Classic Film Review. Today we have a brand new guest, Stephanie. Hello, Stephanie.
Why, hello, Wendy. How are you?
I'm good. And we could probably actually spend most of this podcast talking about all your endeavors, because I know you have a ton of them.
I almost feel like I don't want to let anybody down with the endeavors, because when they there's a lot coming up and I don't get them all finished. I try to keep it all together, but there are some exciting ones coming up that I definitely would like to talk about if I could.
So you do a lot of acting, I think. We met through an organization called Women in Film and Media. So if you want to talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah. So Women in Film and Media, or WIFM, as we call it, because it's hard, it's a lot to say. We are an organization that's Pittsburgh-based. It's actually an international organization, but the Pittsburgh chapter, we, about a year ago, sort of relaunched it. And so now with our new board members, in fact, I just recently became a board member, but I'm also the director of education. So I get to plan all the fantastic events like we do. Some coming up, but we're going to do more acting related ones for casting directors and producers and things like that to come and see. Also talent agencies. So that's coming up in November. But as a director of education, I've been also very fortunate to meet other like-minded women. What's great about it is I think networking with people around here. I've met so many wonderful people like yourself that I wouldn't normally have been able to do.
Same. I mean, Women in Film and Media is a really great organization. I've really found it very helpful in the time I've been there. But tell us a little bit about what acting projects you have coming up or your film projects.
Sure. So I have one that we'll say is acting and directing hybrid possibly, but it's going to be the 48-hour film project.
Good. The horror.
The double retro
horror. Yeah.
Yeah. And my husband and I, Rick Dutro, who is an actor, and
he's great.
He's fantastic.
He's very good.
Very emotional, very just great at those kind of, we'll say, really weighty, sort of meaty roles. He does a great job with that. Maybe I'm biased, but I think he does.
No, I agree. I totally agree. I thought that myself before I even knew he was your husband.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll keep him around too for that reason. But a lot of times when we're in films together, we somehow end up being confrontational and not lovey-dovey.
Yeah.
And in this one, I will be mostly directing would be what I will get to do, and then maybe make a cameo.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Yeah.
I think that comes up in October. That's when the filming starts.
The filming will be September 27th through the 29th, and then the screenings will be in October.
Yeah. So we had to check that out. And how can people follow you if they want to check you out in your projects?
Sure. They can go mostly, I think Facebook's probably the best. And then I have Instagram too, but Facebook is Stephanie Swift.
Yep.
And there are multiple Stephanie Swifts. So make sure that it's usually a picture of me or my cats, or specifically Thumper, or my husband, or all of us together. So that's Stephanie Swift. And then the official Stephanie Swift is my Instagram.
Okay.
Because again, there's other Stephanie Swift. So I was like, I'm not going to be Stephanie Swift 95.
Exactly.
And then I do have a YouTube channel, which is, I think it's Stephanie Swift, just plain, but it could be 1979. Not given any reason why that's a number there, but okay, anyways, do the math. So Stephanie Swift, 1979. And then that's probably about the best. Education at WIFM, PIT.org is my email address for WIFM.
All right. Well, everybody has to go check that out. And we do have, before we start our episode today, some very sad news. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people know that are my listeners that I record all my podcasts at PCTV, Pittsburgh Community Television, and on the north side. And sadly, their funding has been, I don't know, they don't get the funding they used to get. And they unfortunately have to close at the end of this month, at the end of August. And that means that we have this podcast episode and then just the last podcast episode, we have one more episode recording. And after that, we do not know what will happen to the podcast. So very sad. And PCTV is a great resource. It's a real shame. So if anybody has an idea, is interested in sponsoring the podcast, has a place where we could do the podcast, feel free to contact me. Follow me, of course, on Facebook as usual, or Instagram, Silver Screen Time Machine. But let's get on to, I guess not it's necessarily a happier note, but let's get on to the film. It's not a very happy film, but we're going to get in our time machine and we are going to go back to 1963 and we are going to talk about
The Haunting.
The Haunting. All right. Exciting. Yes. So I usually start out by talking about the Academy Awards. That'll be a big nun. And which is that? You know what? Wait. Let me tell you, that house that they designed, what the heck?
Oh.
Who won for production design that year? Because I'm telling you what, who could have designed anything more gorgeous than that thing?
I don't know. And then you look at the exteriors and you think about the fact that, well, do you know, they filmed it in England, which when you think, well, where else are you going to find a place that looks like that? No, it's not in Vermont, where it takes place. But I was just shocked when I saw that opening shot where they just have the exterior and do the whole, we'll say, prologue to the story and get you set up for that. But that's really, really incredible. And it's just...
Yeah, but he built that whole interior, all those interiors.
Yeah.
Those interiors are phenomenal.
I would have never guessed that they were built. I would have thought they were just part of that.
We're going to talk about the production designer, but my God, if anybody in this film deserved an Oscar, which I think more than just he, I think many people in this film deserve Oscars. This production designer, that's the most egregious one in my opinion. So this film is based on a novel by Shirley Jackson. This is actually one of the few... Of all my podcasts I've ever done, this is the only book I've actually read. So it is actually called The Haunting of Hill House from 1959. A little bit about Shirley Jackson. Growing up, she had a difficult relationship with her mother. You kind of see that in her books. Who clearly favored her brother and didn't appreciate her daughter being a writer and not like the other girls. Yeah.
So she should have just been a homemaker.
Yep, I think that's what she expected. Her maternal grandmother believed in Christian Science, something that Jackson felt very skeptical of. I think this is another theme that comes into it. It's very interesting when you hear the childhood of writers because so much about their childhood sort of creeps into their books, in my opinion. She would attend Syracuse College and majored in journalism and met her husband, Stanley Hyman, there. Her husband was a teacher at Bennington College and would carry on affairs with many of his students, eventually forcing Shirley to accept the idea of an open marriage.
Did not know that.
What a lovely man.
Yeah, great guy.
Shirley suffered from severe anxiety, which would prevent her from going out of the house for long periods of time. She was almost phobic. She was prescribed barbiturates for this condition, as was common in the time. Unfortunately, she would also be prescribed amphetamines for weight loss. Again, this is a very common thing that they did.
It's not a good mixture.
This is what happened to Elvis. This is what happened to Marilyn Monroe. I mean, this was a common thing. In addition, she was a heavy smoker and would begin drinking heavily as well. And unfortunately, she would die of a heart attack at age 48, possibly complicated by these factors. Some of her other well-known and acclaimed writings are The Lottery and We Have Always Lived in a Castle. This book, I'm telling you, I had an English teacher in high school, and I was terrible in high school. I paid no attention, but for some reason, I can remember this English teacher's name and everything, Dr. Macaulay. Dr. Macaulay said, the most scariest book I've ever read is The Haunting of Hill House, and it inspired me to go out and get the book and read it. And there is something about the way she writes. I don't know if you've actually read the book. But the way she can produce imagery in your mind, it's amazing.
It is pretty incredible. Yeah. It's her descriptive nature, but it's weird because it doesn't feel like you're reading a description. It actually feels like you're looking at a picture.
It. Yeah, yes, exactly.
And I think it's also the ease of how she writes the page, you know, or how she sets up what's happening in the story. You feel drawn in, but you don't feel forced to focus on the individual words. You're looking at it as almost a whole artistic piece already, just from how she depicts everything.
I mean, it's amazing talent. And I do think that's why her book is considered so incredibly scary, because of her talent for making you feel that you're in the scene in a way. Our screenplay is by Nelson Gidding. Nelson,
are you kidding me? Oh, come on.
Nelson was nominated for one Oscar, I Want to Live, which I think is also a Robert Weiss film. He was born in New York City. He was friends growing up with Norman Mailer. He graduated from Harvard and joined the Air Force in World War II. His plane was shot down over Italy, but he survived, and he was taken prisoner of war for 18 months before he managed to actually escape a German prison camp. During his imprisonment, he began to write his first and only novel, East Over End, and he is a frequent collaborator with Robert Weiss. And I'm not a fan of how he took the book and he just chose to interpret it in a different fashion. And I don't like what he did, personally. I mean, I think he stayed a lot true to the book, but he didn't want the story to be about a haunting, more about a psychosis in the mind of Nell. That's not really what it was.
No, it becomes more of a psychological thriller than it does really a horror film, because the way that the book and then the screenplay sort of differ from each other vastly too is sort of how the characters initially interact with each other, and then even just characters coming into the picture that were not really depicted in the book at all the same way and are just contrary to that. But I think that the reason why is they felt with the cast members that they had in England, you know, when they were starting to film, that they wanted to play up, especially the doctor, but they didn't make it about Eleanor in the beginning as much as I would have liked. But then all of a sudden it becomes her story. Right. As we go through it.
And I would say the book is from Eleanor's point of view.
Correct. Yeah, the POV is different.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk more about this as we go through this. And the cinematographer, Davis Bolton, he's a British cinematographer. The Haunting was only his second film as director of photography. Can you believe that?
I don't believe that at all. I mean, every single shot is beautiful. Oh,
it's amazing.
Even just the skill set in following, or just how he was able to, it was very, I think, a daunting task to capture some of those very complicated shots where like somebody's falling or where, you know, they're going up the stairs and it's like, I don't know, it was giving me kind of, I'm like, hi, I'm dizzy. Yeah. You know, I can't even watch this. This shot. And I thought, this is brilliant just from a cinematography.
And he, like I said, second film as director of photography. He would also go on to film other horror films in the 1960s, such as Children of the Damned and It. Weiss and Bolton hit on the idea of using an infrared film for establishing shots of the house. That's why the house looks so interesting. But Weiss felt the infrared film brought out the striations in the stone and made the mansion look more of a monster house.
Okay.
So that's how they shot all the exteriors.
I wondered how they created that effect without
with the infrared.
Or even how they did when the house looks like it's glowing, or that effect that you're talking about. I love the opening, The Haunting, when the title comes up, how it almost melts into the stone and it oozes. It reminded me of lava. Yeah, they do such a good job. For everything about this is amazing. And then for a little more about the cinematography, Weiss and Bolton also wanted to make the distances in the film, such as hallways, look longer and darker than the audiences would anticipate, which they do. These hallways look endless. Yeah. Weiss and Bolton also used planned shots that kept the camera moving, utilized low-angle shots, and incorporated unusual pans and tracking shots to accentuate the feeling that the house was alive. Exterior shots were filmed so the windows appeared to be eyes. And they did.
And they did. They looked exactly like that.
And even they would light up, and then next thing you know, they weren't. Yeah. But you were thinking, was there a person there, or was there something else?
Yeah. And there's even more I have about the camera as we go along, I think, in the trivia or as we're talking. The editor, Ernest Walker, here's another guy. He's a British editor, just a British editor. These people are so obscure that I could hardly find any information about them. I mean, neither of these guys had a Wikipedia page, for example.
And that usually means there's no information about you if you don't have a Wikipedia page.
I mean, I got a little bit off of IMDb, but he started out as a cameraman for the Army in World War II, and he filmed the D-Day landings. He would then switch over to editor after joining MGM. He's also known for Superman, 1978, and The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes. And first of all, any editor is going to be great under Robert Weiss, because Robert Weiss was an editor. He was one of the greatest editors of all time. He was the editor of Citizen Kane. So I think that Robert Weiss basically edited his films. He just, I believe, I don't know for a fact, but I have a feeling he was like David Lean. And when it came to the editing, he was in that room with the editor the entire time.
And that's, you know what, too, maybe from a directing standpoint, he approached each shot thinking with as an editor. You know, this is what I want to have to be able to cut. Maybe I won't do as many rolling takes. Maybe I won't waste time. Because sometimes directors want to have more. Right. But then if someone's an editor, or if they understand that, or if they're skilled in that, they say, we got what we need. Yeah. Like, I don't need to continue.
Well, he even told Richard Johnson, who plays the doctor, not to worry about his timing because he'd sort that out in the editing. So
there you go.
Yeah. He said, don't worry about your timing.
They probably didn't waste a lot of time on set either. I can't imagine that it was like 25 takes or,
Oh, yeah. I doubt it.
A David Fincher take 125.
Yeah. William Wyler, wasn't he one?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think he was a big. So some of the examples we can give real quick about the editing is in the beginning of the film with Abigail Crane as a child in bed and then aging.
That's my favorite shot. Okay, well, editing. Not my favorite, but it's my favorite effect in the very beginning, other than the house and what they did with that whole, what'd you call it, infrared? Yeah. Yeah, but I love the aging because you're just watching and then you see this little young face turning into middle age and then the old, and then the helper's there. The companion. The companion's there. Yeah, and you see them interact and she comes back to life. They said for that shot, the camera was fixed over the bed, obviously, and 4 different actresses, each a different age, posed on the bed beneath the camera, and then they used dissolves to illustrate the aging process. And think about that, 1963.
1963, yeah, very, very cutting edge.
Definitely. And they'd have to cut it, too, cutting edge. I like what you did there.
Many of the editing choices in the film were also used to heighten the audience's discomfort. Worked.
Totally worked.
There are a couple of rapid cuts in the film. There are a lot of rapid cuts in the film, and that throws off the viewer's sense of spatial orientation. And then likewise, cutting on action is often violated, showing characters exiting a room to the right and then to show them entering the next room from the left. So that the viewer cannot get a clear sense of what rooms and hallways are connected to each other.
And then when you think about it, the characters in the beginning weren't able to find where they were going. They were looking for the doctor, and when Theo and Eleanor are going down that hallway, they go into how many different rooms, and then next thing they know, they open the door, and they had maybe already tried that door before, but now it's something different. Yeah. Or there's no actual right angles in the house, and that's what they reference so much in the book. Yeah. The play, there's many references to cannot find this same room in Hill House. There was sections of the house built onto sections of a house that you couldn't even access or you didn't know how to get to. Yeah. And it was like this house just had this life of its own where it would just keep expanding, and then it would contract on you when it needed to. But they totally set that up with the way that they had them go in and out of rooms and not know where they were, but then the camera cutting from them being over here, and now all of a sudden they're coming out of the door over here. You're confused too as an audience member. What's happening? Yeah, it's very confusing, and sort of like the Winchester house in a way, that's a good, I think, analogy. Score by Humphrey Seal. He's a British composer who studied music at the Royal College of Music before being tutored by Anton Webern. His studying with Webern influenced him in becoming one of the pioneers of serial music in the UK, as well as being one of the first to use an atonal score for this film, The Haunting, which would become popular in other horror films such as The Exorcist and The Shining. Anybody who doesn't know what atonal music is? Me. Atonal music is music that lacks a tonal center or key. It usually describes compositions written from about the early 20th century to present day, where a hierarchy of harmonies are focused in a single central triad. The notes of the chromatic scale function independently of each other. In layman's terms, I suppose, this is confusing because I asked a friend of mine, music which has no tonal center and avoids melody and any pleasing aspects of traditional music. That's absolutely what I was going to say. I have a music background. Oh, okay. And I should have just... It's also used to create... There's never a sense of resolution. Yeah. It's kind of like when you end a song on a seventh, which is it's not a harmony, it's more of a dissonant. That's sort of what it creates. It creates this kind of disturbing, alarming, terrifying feeling that you have that's just evoked by music. Yeah, the music in here is very spooky, and I talk about the music when we get into the plot, like throughout. I mention parts. So here's my guy, our production designer, Elliot Scott, 3-time Oscar nominee, never won. Poor guy. This guy's a British art director, production director. He is known he did Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He did Indiana Jones. What? In The Last Crusade. He did the original Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. He did Labyrinth. It said the interior sets were constructed and shot at MGM British Studios, and the interior sets were designed by Elliot Scott.
and he is credited by Weiss as a major contributor to The Haunting. The sets were designed to be brightly lit with no dark corners or recesses and decorated in a Rococo style. All rooms had ceilings to create a claustrophobic effect in film. Anybody that's been on a film knows that generally there's no ceiling.
Usually not.
That beautiful, beautiful building that doesn't look very beautiful in the film is called Ettington Park, and it has a grounds near the village of Ettington. God, I hate that word.
It's so very British. It's probably like Ettington,
Warwickshire, which was used for exterior shots of Hill House. The production designer, Elliot Scott, toured the country to look for possible candidates for Hill House, and that is what he chose, which I think was a great choice. Cool. You should have gone and seen it. We were just in the England area. Just jump over to
I should
Warwickshire.
I should have jumped across the pond when I was there and gone to Warwickshire.
And director Robert Weiss, we don't have to talk about him because we had him in The Sound of Music, and we talked extensively about him in The Sound of Music. So anybody that wants to know the background on Robert Weiss, now you will have to go and listen to my Sound of Music podcast.
Yeah.
All right. We're through the crew.
But Sound of Music is very different than The Haunting.
Yeah, but it still has very beautiful editing and cinematography. So in a way, it's still the beautiful production. Yeah. Here's some trivia. The line, journeys end in lovers meeting, that Eleanor thinks of after a conversation with Dr. Markway, which they say this journeys end in lovers meeting a lot in the book, I feel like. It is from the song, "O Mistress Mine, Where Are You Roaming?" by William Shakespeare, sung by the jester Feste in the Twelfth Night.
Twelfth Night.
I was like, if I get this wrong, she's going to know, because I'm sure she knows this. She probably knows this play.
Absolutely. Twelfth Night's one of and it's a comedy. It is one of, I think, Shakespeare's finer pieces. And I think that maybe that song that you reference is very whimsical because of the fact that, I don't know if you've ever seen, there's also a character, Sir Toby Belch, and is very well known in, I think it might be Twelfth Night too. Now I'm kind of blanking, but it's very much like a very lyrical sense.
Yeah. Oh, Mistress Mine, Where Are You Roaming? That is the song.
Yes.
It's a lovely title.
I can't sing it for you.
Oh, Mistress Mine, where are you roaming?
Mistress Mine, where art thou going?
Oh, very nice. Well, it's a nice ad lib there, even if you can do. Weiss approached United Artists with the project, but after much delay, they turned him down. Weiss's agents then suggested that since Weiss owed MGM a film under an old contract, he should take the project there. MGM agreed, but would only give Weiss a $1 million budget, which in 1963 was not very good. Actors were making $1 million in a film. Weiss knew he could not do the film at MGM's Culver City Studios, so he took it to England, as the Eadie levy gave tax breaks and financing to films made there as a way of subsidizing and promoting British film industry, and they offered him a budget of $1,050.
The $50 is what totally made the difference. 50. But wait a minute, inflation, and was it in pounds? So like hopefully that equaled
that's true. Actually,
more.
It didn't say, maybe it was pounds, but that's also a reason why you have so many British crew. You have all this British crew. You have all these British actors, because when they do these sort of things with the tax credits and stuff, you have to have a majority of people that are British.
And it was those readily available that they knew that they could count on, that could be there, because I'm sure a lot of it has to do with logistics when you're planning something like that. If it's filmed here in the States, in California, they wouldn't have had the exteriors. No. They would have had to be elsewhere. So they would have had to have multiple locations. All of the locations that I saw on IMDb were around that fancy place that we all don't want to have to pronounce.
I think it's just basically the studio with the interiors and the exteriors. I don't think there was really much else in the film.
Because they don't go off the grounds. Now, there is a little bit of a difference when she's coming from Boston. It's supposed to be Boston, which I was wondering where they shot that. I would love to know.
Oh, where her home was?
Yeah, because you figure if they're shooting it in England,
right,
they drive on the left side.
That's true.
All of those things, I was thinking, the signage, I mean, that's something you can easily fix, but they must have found an area around where they were in England that they could just do that and make it, because there are a lot of roundabouts there too. Unlike the film where there's no corners in the house, there are corners when she's driving there, if you watch, and when she comes up to the gate and then sees Mr. Dudley.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah, don't worry. We're getting there. We'll get there. Okay. To make Bloom's character appear more bohemian, they used mod fashion designer Mary Quant. to design the clothing specifically for the Theo character. Wise approached the Panavision company and wanted an anamorphic wide-angle lens. The only lens Panavision had was a 40 millimeter. Wise learned that the company was working on a 30 millimeter lens, but it contained distortions and was not ready. Wise kept pressing, and eventually Panavision turned over the 30 millimeter lens on the condition that Wise signed a memorandum in which he acknowledged it was imperfect, but that's what he wanted. He wanted the distortions, and we can talk about that as we go through.
Now, with an anamorphic lens, don't you need a lot of light too? Because if you don't have light, it's not going to open up the aperture
lens
to allow that in.
I think they had a lot of light in some of the scenes. Like I said, that they really lit the room scenes. It's just the hallways.
And some of the faces too, they wanted them hot.
They really did a nice job.
Or they would do a
of
shadow
lighting
on purpose because they didn't want you to see.
They did a great job of lighting the characters. It was a lot of times it was just the character only and everything else was dark. Yeah, it's very cool. Yeah. To enhance the actors' performances during the scenes in which they react to offstage voices or sounds, Weiss and his sound editors created a pre-scored soundtrack of voices and noises, and they actually played that during filming, so they actually were reacting to the sounds they heard.
Versus them pretending,
right,
this scary noise, there's going to be pounding and then babies crying and people screaming, but then instead it was actually happening.
That was actually happening, yes. I think this is very interesting. This film contains a number of special effects, many of which were achieved in ways not immediately obvious to the viewers. In one scene, a supernatural force pushes against a large parlor door, bending it inward repeatedly.
It gets bent.
Yep. The door appears to be made of latex, possibly. It was, in fact, made of laminated wood, and the strange buckling was simply the result of a strong crew member pushing a piece of timber hard against it.
No.
Yes.
And that it didn't break through. It just kept doing the old popping in and out. Oh.
And I mean, there's not to say, too, that they didn't use a lens that sort of enhanced that.
Almost like a concave
feature, or even like an editing trick that enhanced the feature possibly. But yeah, no, that's what they did. And then, okay, the staircase. There were two physical effects. In the one scene, the camera appears to ascend the staircase at a rapid rate. Weiss achieved this effect by using the staircase's handrail as a makeshift dolly track. A camera was attached to the rail and then slowly allowed to slide down with the speed of descent controlled by a wire attached to the camera. The sequence was then reversed and run at high speed.
That's brilliant. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that.
I love these sort of like these measures these people resort to in these low budget productions. Where, like in the one we did recently, Mario Bava, Blood and Black Lace, and they said they had a child's wagon that they had attached the camera to use as a dolly. And I thought that was so interesting. Yeah. And then the collapsing staircase effect was designed by a metal worker at the Boreham Wood Studios. The effect was created by tying portions of the steps and the railing to a cable that ran inside the staircase's central support column. When the cable was slackened, the elements of the stairways loosened up and moved freely. And then when they tightened it, the staircase appeared solid and stable. But the cast were so disturbed by this particular staircase that they did not want to get on the thing.
They truly looked terrified. I don't think it was acting. I think it was like, it was so rickety. You know, and I'm thinking, all right, so they don't have a stunt person. Most likely, then 1963.
They did have one stunt person. They had the lady that fell down the steps in the beginning. They had a stunt person doing that.
I wondered about that. Yeah, I thought, that was
their one stunt person.
They didn't have the actors.
That was the one stunt person.
One stunt person. We got you for a day, so let's see how many we can.
Yeah,
we can
all
get
those
out
like
of
dying sequences. She was kind of part of those. I mean, I'd be afraid to be on that thing.
Oh, yeah. Even if you think about the fact that they show it starting to separate from the wall.
Separate and shake.
It's shaking violently. Yeah. And then, Richard is on it. The actor, I think it was Richard. Richard Johnson. So he's on it. And then the actress that played Eleanor.
Yeah, Julie Harris.
Yeah, so Julie is at the top of it almost. Yeah. And she's about to step onto sort of the more secure part. Yeah, the platform. And he's there. And it's like, the thing is shaking. Like, I kid you not, it was like a magnitude 8.2 going off.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you don't have to act much at that point. You're truly scared. Yeah. The Haunting is notable for its lesbian character, Theodora. Although the character's lesbianism is subtly mentioned in the novel, the film makes it explicit. This film is also one of the few Hollywood motion pictures of the day to depict a lesbian as feminine and not predatory. Although I find her a little predatory sometimes.
Mm-hmm. A little bit with Eleanor.
Nell.
Yeah, with Nell. She's kind of more trying to feel her out per se. I mean, make that inappropriate, but like she wants to know if, hey, Nell, what are you going to return to?
Right.
Now in the play, And in the book, that's different because she's not, in fact, near the end, she wants to get rid of her. She doesn't, she wants to get back to her own life. Theo
I agree.
doesn't want
and you know
that.
what? When I read the book, I missed that entirely. So it is very subtle. In the
Either
book.
very
I
subtle
actually thought
or there's
she was
only a couple lines maybe.
In the book, I thought she was interested in Luke.
They are. In fact, in the play, which I think I had told you, I was in the play last year with Stage Warp, which is really amazing. I got to play Mrs. Montague, who's not even in
she's not in
this
not
iteration.
In the movie.
It's just more a Mrs. Markway, and she just makes a brief appearance and has a little bit to do and say. But in the play, she's very angry, and then Nell is very much as she is in the film.
Right.
But Theo is probably the most different because when she comes in, she is wanting to have this thing with Luke, and she's mad because Luke in the play is giving Nell all the attention.
Yeah, there's definitely in the book a rivalry between the two girls.
And in the novel, too.
So last piece of trivia, director Martin Scorsese placed The Haunting first on his list of the 11 scariest horror films of all time, and Robert Weiss said that Steven Spielberg told him The Haunting was the scariest film ever made. So
those are two things I've heard before about those particular directors that I thought, well, if they have to say that about it,
you can't have better.
I'm terrified too. No, and I was terrified more so reading the book than when I first watched the movie, but I also, from a filmmaking perspective, I think I was watching it like I want to be in the story.
Yeah.
That way. So I looked at it differently than when maybe I'm by myself watching it and under the covers and it's a dark and stormy night. That might be a little bit different, but I think in general, I could see especially someone who never read the book or anything, watching that and being completely terrified, not knowing what to expect.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you've read the book, the film is not as scary to you. I mean, it's still scary, but I think the book is so terrifying that the film can't really live up to that because it doesn't give you the imagination phase. That's the thing. It shows you. Whereas in the book, you imagine. So you technically, I think, imagine things much worse in your mind. Like, oh my God. That one scene in the book, I can never forget this about when she talks about how the picnic with the puppy and the children that they see in the woods. I'll never forget that. Never. So you really should read the book.
And that's not in the film.
Nope. Okay. Let's start talking about the film.
Wait, we weren't? Oh, no.
Let's get into the plot. Get into the plot.
Let's deep dive.
So here's my thoughts. Right off the bat, you get this music right off the bat. I like this sort of spooky chimes-like music. You're probably better at this stuff. I'm terrible at instruments, but it has a sort of chimey sound to it, like wind chimey sound. I know it's not wind chimes.
I think it might be a xylophone, but it's a little bit...
Yeah, maybe.
Like, it's almost like the xylophone sounds like it's staccato.
Yeah, it's like a tinkly sound.
Yeah, so it's... You hit it and then the sound and it's gone.
Yeah. So as soon as you see the film, you have this spooky chime music, I call it. And then you have this creepy narration from, I believe it is actually Richard Johnson, who plays Dr. Markway. I think he's doing the narration here. And then you see the house right off the bat, the house in the dark it always has this cloudy sky in the background. And I'm like, okay. There's no way the clouds were always there when they were filming. Did they mat those clouds in?
I think they might have done that.
But at one point, the clouds are moving. So I was like, okay, is it rear projection? What
luckily, I don't think that they did a backdrop per se, because, I mean, imagine the scale of the backdrop. But what I think they might have done is if they had a model of that and then they could do the scrim or sort of do that, they could do... of that. I mean, what's the effect that a lot of directors use? Like Alfred Hitchcock uses it a lot.
Rear projection?
Yeah, rear project. I don't think it's that.
No, I don't. And I'm very happy about the lack of rear projection in this movie because I'm not a fan of it. And as anybody who's listened to any of my podcasts knows I hate that. As a matter of fact, I was so impressed, and I'll say it when we get to about the car scenes, that there was no rear projection. I was very happy about that. Then you have your title, The Haunting. It has even this sort of misty ghost haunting looking like the words look like that. And then there's this spooky music throughout the credits. There's a lot of strings and then you have these drums that sound
jarring,
like, very, very good.
Beating.
And then, this more of this narration. And Richard Johnson in this particular narration, he just has a creepy sound to his voice when he says these things.
He really does.
Yeah,
I think he was like channeling Vincent Price or something.
It would have been nice to have Vincent Price do it.
Oh, yeah.
I love him.
Remake? No.
Yeah.
well,
no,
I think he's dead.
He's not alive.
That would be a creepy remake.
Yeah, that would be great. We call Vincent Price back from the dead.
Vincent Price, please. Please do the narration.
Darkness falls.
Darkness falls.
Okay. And then you get, then this is really cool because you get these bunch of reenactments that show you what has happened before. And the way the reenactments done are so beautifully done because, and this is the greatest thing to me about this film, is that you don't see anybody getting killed per se, but the way they represent what happens to them, the sort of, how I don't even know how to say it, but you say, oh, there's an accident, and all you see is this broken wheel and this one
then you
wrist.
see hand.
Yes, this
Or
lifeless wrist.
It just drops.
And then the bracelet falls down too. And I was like, that's so interesting. But it makes it so much more interesting because it seems more even dramatic that way.
And
than if you just
implied,
seen...
and then you fill in the rest of the picture.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's so great when they do that. And then that's how it starts out. That's the second wife. She's killed outside by a carriage accident. And then, and also these dissolves they have into the scenes. There's like a misty dissolve.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
It's a mask or something. I don't know how they do it, but
yeah, it's very interesting. Cool. And then there's that scene with Hugh Crane and the daughter, and the poor daughter, they're sitting there looking at the dead mother, and he's reading from the Bible, and this poor little girl tries to like turn her away and leave.
And then he turns her, I know, he like makes her look again.
Stare at your dead mother, child.
This is what could happen to you.
And then this reenactment bit goes on for a bit. There's a lot of camera tricks on this next one with the second wife. The second wife now is in the house, and she's going up the stairs, or she's up at the top of the stairs, and then she gets pushed down. It's really interesting because what they'll do is it will be like the camera is coming at her, and then the next thing is you see the point of view of her as she's like tumbling.
Would they speed it up so they could get to that point? So maybe put it on a dolly or put it, because they wouldn't obviously have a drone to be able to do this, but they can project it and then bring it back. Maybe there's some sort of effect to play it even in reverse sometimes if it's going away. But if it's going to them, they just speed it up. Like, whoo.
Yeah, boom. The camera's
and then
the big shot
then
of the camera.
the tumble down the stairs.
And then you see
it
her
follows,
point of view.
That
and then you see her point of view too.
I almost threw up. I was like, oh,
it's incredibly impressive. It really, really is, because how they do it is very impressive. And there's a very loud, dramatic music here. And like I said, the cutting with getting her point of view. First, you see her fall. You get a cutting between her falling and her point of view of the room spinning around.
around.
Yeah, it's really, really amazing. And then that image of her lying on the floor, the way they have the camera almost on the floor, and you just see her head, and it's
isn't it masterful?
It is, yes. Masterful is a good word. And then you have another mist dissolve, and then there's more. There's all this background narration while this is going on. You see this poor little Abigail, and she has to read the Bible, and then she's in the bed, and they do the face changing sequence that we talked about. And then lastly, there's old Abigail now. She has a companion, and the companion sneaks out, and she's banging on the wall. She's banging on the wall while the companion's making out with this boy in the front area or whatever. And then you see the stick drop, which then you know to indicate.
And did you realize the correlation? I was going to say
foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing. I was about to say correlation, foreshadowing.
That's a correlation with Eleanor's mother.
I didn't read your notes.
No, I know.
So
we're like, I'm telling you, we're on the same thing. And then you see, this too is a great scene, the companion going up the staircase with the rope.
With the,
amazing.
The rope. And then all you see is the limp.
And then, because then you get this overhead. First of all, you get the overhead shot of the staircase, and then it follows her up the staircase.
Then, next thing you know,
it pans over to the side, and then the next thing you see is her legs.
And just like her legs.
Yeah.
Her legs. It's like a drop, her legs, and then them dangling.
Yeah. And again, it's just the effect is so much more effective, I think, to me that way.
There were so many good choices made by the director and,
definitely.
even, the cast too. Obviously, when you're hanging, you don't make that choice necessarily, and I'm sure that they had a way to do it, but just the way that the camera then is going to capture that, so it's super effective.
It's incredible. And then after that, there's this really great circular zoom down the staircase, and I thought that must be the camera on the railing.
Probably they're doing the railing.
And then it crossfades onto this old lady's face. Now we're in present day. This is Mrs. Sanderson, and she's talking to Dr. Markway. We get introduced to Dr. Markway now, and we find out she's the owner of Hill House. He's trying to convince her he's an anthropologist, which different than the book.
It's very different. In the book,
professional.
Yes. In the book, in the play, he's much more professional, but he's also there as a scientist. He's not approaching it from the same perspective. It's almost as if he wants to take a psychological / scientific approach to it versus like a clairvoyant and or
I feel like in the book he's more like a paranormal investigator, whereas this guy here in the movie is more like an actual scientist. I don't know. I just thought it was portrayed very differently. I didn't think Dr. Montague was as serious in the book as Dr. Markway is.
No, I don't think so either. And there were definitely moments whenever, if they would ask about wife or, about his life, that he would not even go there in the movie, but in the book, in the play, he would bring things up, but also, too, they would tease him about it. So that wasn't really in the film.
Yeah, no, I thought that Dr. Markway was very intense.
Dynamic.
He was a very intense fellow. Since we're talking about Dr. Markway, we should probably talk about the actor real quick, Richard Johnson. Everybody knows Richard Johnson, right? Very well-known actor. Not. But anyhow.
I was like, who's he again?
Well, you might have known of him if he had made some different choices. But he's a British actor. He attended the prestigious Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, which in England, that is the cream of the crop.
Creme de la creme.
That is like the Yale or whatever's the highest thing.
It's like the Juilliard, maybe.
Yeah. Because of the shortage of men due to the war, he was able to get work on the stage starting right out at age 17. But then he would join the Royal Navy for several years. Upon his return, he was able to get work in television and would continue to work in theater as well, eventually working with the Royal Shakespeare Company, which is a very prestigious theater company as well. He was considered a great stage actor and came to the attention of MGM, who signed him to a contract. He was offered the role of James Bond, but turned it down.
Wait, what?
He was supposed to be the original James Bond.
He would have been Bond.
The role went to Sean Connery instead.
Why did he turn it down?
He was actually under contract with MGM. That's why they said he turned it down. But
you're right. We would have all known him.
I don't think at the time anybody thought James Bond was going to turn out to be this big thing either.
Like they didn't know it'd become this international sensation that would have multiple
he would go on
franchises.
He would go on to have some good success in films in the 1960s, none that I had heard of, but apparently he worked pretty steadily. And he would also marry Kim Novak.
Okay.
And then he would eventually go back to the stage and start up a production company, United British Artists, with Albert Finney and Maggie Smith. He would continue acting in film, television, and theater until his death in 2015. He would also teach acting in various universities. He wrote travel articles for the Mail on Sunday. That's the name of a newspaper in England. He wrote and maintained a blog called The Shakespeare Masterclass and was the founder of It's a Green, Green World, a global list of environmentally friendly hotels.
Wow. So he also
He's a busy guy.
He cared about the environment, too. Which
yes, he did. And you know what? I will say the one thing about all the actors in this film, all the main actors in this film acted almost to their deaths. They literally were acting.
They didn't stop at somewhere in their like 50s or 60s. They kept going.
Yeah, exactly. They're not retired from acting. I kind of have a crush on him.
I have to say, he's very handsome.
Intense
I find him way more attractive than Luke, which in the play and the book, I kept thinking Luke is probably like this like Rico Suave. He's really attractive, but I thought Luke was kind of
I thought Russ Tamblyn was
dorky, or not even dorky, but just kind of
dorky.
I don't find him very likable.
No, I thought Russ Tamblyn was really miscast in that role. I would have put somebody like Rod Taylor in that role.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, that would be more like a kind of role for him.
And I think that was his only major role, if I'm right. I mean, we'll see.
Russ Tamblyn? No, he was in Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. He was in West Side Story.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll get to Russ Tamblyn. We're getting ahead. Anyhow, so he's talking to the old lady. He's trying to get her to let him go to Hill House. And she's trying to warn him. In a quote she says that I like, "The dead are not quiet in Hill House." But he doesn't care about her warnings. No. And then she starts asking him, how does he propose to conduct this research? And he says, well, he has some assistants. And she says, are they women?
Yes.
And he says, well, yeah. And she says, well, are you bringing your wife? And he says, no. And then
Liar.
She says, well,
oh, no. Remember, she just shows up.
She says, well, I better send my nephew Luke along with you just to keep track of you. And plus, on top of it, Luke is going to inherit the place, so he can go see what it's really like to live there.
And that is the same in the play and the book.
That is the same. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I like the close-ups in the scene. I love when he has the characters talk to each other and he cross-cuts the close-ups between the different characters. There's
a lot of that. I think it was very progressive, a lot of what you see in the film, not just even some of the camera work, but even some of the acting techniques. There wasn't a lot of very extreme close-ups on faces in many movies before that. Right. In fact, the horror genre, which is what it was billed under, they didn't even take that seriously. They were all at the B-movie theaters with a double feature. Yeah. This one was actually played in the primary theaters. When it came out, it was billed up there with whatever else was coming out in 1963 that was going to be romantic, type film or something that was more of a classic. This became something that was really progressive.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's because we have Robert Weiss at the helm, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I think without Robert Weiss, you're just going to have a low budget. And this was a low budget film, technically.
I mean, when you think about
was not a lot.
I don't know what that'd be the equivalent to today, but you couldn't make something like that now.
Well, it would be very,
Probably.
even in 1963, that was a very low budget for that kind of, I mean, they had better budgets than that.
So they must have not paid actors.
Well, again,
really
that's
well,
why,
and
again, we
then-
have kind of these British actors that maybe are not as well known. We don't have any real big name actor right here. I mean, Russ Tamblyn and Julie Harris had done some stuff, but they weren't huge box office stars. As a matter of fact, Russ Tamblyn, his big box office success came in West Side Story, and that had just been made with Robert Weiss. And I don't think it was even out yet when they made this film. So
I
Russ
almost feel like he's more of a musical theater
He is.
type
Oh, yeah, he is.
performer,
That's
and there's
why
nothing wrong
it's-
with that. That's why it was weird.
odd.
I mean,
It's
it just
very
was.
odd.
It felt very odd. And I guess when he signed on, he actually tried to back out, and
Yep.
they told him he couldn't. Like,
Yeah.
I wish that they had said,
yeah,
"Go ahead."
Yeah, find somebody
Yep.
else.
Yeah, we'll
Sorry,
find
Russ Tamblyn's
a
still
new-
alive. Apologies for
He is. I know,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I looked it up. I'm like,
yeah.
is this guy still alive?
Okay, so next thing we have is Markaway has these list of names, and then he's marking them off on a chalkboard. There's a dissolve, and then you get this close up of Nell. So Nell's in here. She's in her family house. She's arguing with her relative. She wants to take the car. I think you get right off the sense how sort of unnerved Nell is, or something like anxious, and you get right off the bat this feeling that Nell is not all right.
No, there's something not quite.
She's not okay.
Right. Yeah, going on there, and how she is being treated by her sister.
Oh, like a child.
Oh, yeah, she is. And in fact, they don't want her to use the car.
No.
They're like, basically, I don't care if you pay for half the
Yeah,
car. You
you're
know,
not
you
having
can't
it.
take half the car. You're
Yeah.
not going. And you're also not leaving the house. And she said, I deserve this. I've been taking care of
Your
mom for
mother.
11 years. Come on.
And that says, again, a reference to her mother already. This is what she does through the whole film. She talks about her mother. Her mother is renting space in her
She takes up a good,
Yeah.
she has like 100% occupancy.
Yeah. So you already get the sense of what this woman has been through, and it's not good. She hasn't gone into great detail, but you already have a small background on her just from the scene. And I wrote in my notes, sister is really a jerk.
Sister is really a jerk. And
The husband wasn't that.
yeah.
The husband seemed a little nicer.
He might have been a little nicer to her, but I think that almost set her up, though, to say, I deserve a vacation, and I've been
going.
invited, and I'm going to go.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah. And then what we see next is she's in the garage and she's getting the car from the attendant. And he's like, well, wait, who are you? And she gives him all this identification to prove who she is.
Boston.
Yeah. Well, and then she gives him an identification, proves who she is. So he lets her have the car. Thank goodness, they needed identification. Some of these films, I swear, they would just give the car to anybody.
Who are you? Okay,
Yeah.
I won't care.
And then she pulls up out of the garage to look at the road signs, right? So you have these road signs that
That's a great shot, too.
pointing every which way.
It almost felt
Yeah.
like, which way is up, or
on
hi,
some weird maze or
right,
something. Yeah. And
Confused.
then there's a close up in the car, and then this is when they first start her thinking narrative.
She's
she
starting
goes
in
through
her
these
head.
thinking
Oh, my.
narratives, and the music is all very tinkly when she does her thinking narrative. I like the music when she does that. She's reading this letter that gives directions, and then finally she figures out where to go. She starts driving, and I wrote, "Driving on the road seems no rear projection. How delightful."
That's
How
right.
delightful.
How delightful.
How did Robert Weiss
And-
manage it on a $1 million budget, and Alfred Hitchcock could not figure it out at all? Explain. Discuss.
good question.
Discuss amongst yourselves.
Just talk amongst yourselves.
And then the music, when she's driving the car, is like this cheerful kind of, oh, we're on a trip.
It's very hopeful.
Yeah,
Hi.
la 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 la.
Going
But
to-
then when she starts to think in her head, back to that little tinkly weird music, and then as soon as she's done thinking and she's driving again, then you're back to the cheerful music. So it's really interesting. And I thought they must have had a camera on the dash.
I think so too.
Yeah, 'cause I can't
And
see how
especially
else.
whenever you get some great shots from like here
Yeah,
up,
right.
and it's mostly her eyes, which I thought
Yeah, a
they
lot of,
were
like, face close-ups
really
even.
really amazing. Just her driving and being so neurotic already.
Yeah.
And just trying to act normal
Yeah.
as she's driving, because we can all tell when she gets there, that's good, fine, dandy, but she has to get there.
Yeah, but she's kind of a mess right off the bat.
already.
Let's talk about her. Julie Harris playing Eleanor Lance. One Oscar nomination for Best Actress in the film A Member of the Wedding, which I'm not familiar
Never
with that
seen.
film. At a young age, she wanted to be an actress and would ask her parents to send her to a performing arts school. She also attended Yale School of Drama. She was one of the first members of Lee Strasberg's Actors Studio. She was a celebrated stage, film, and television actress, winning 5 Tonys and 3 Emmys. She never retired from acting and was still making films up to 2009, spanning 5 decades. While making this film, she suffered from depression and would not socialize with the other actors, especially Claire Bloom, who plays Theo, who she refused to speak throughout the entire film. After production wrapped, she would apologize to Claire and explain she felt it was necessary to behave that way to get into character. That's very typical method acting.
I was just going to say, with method and at the Lee Strasberg School, there's a lot
especially
there's a real
Strasberg.
emphasis on you wouldn't treat someone contrary to what you're going to be doing in the film.
Yeah.
And because she was so very neurotic about what's happening in the house and to her own sort of metamorphosis, she's not going to allow any of those other external factors to change her character.
Yeah, and it might also explain why she had such a depression. I think Lee Strasberg really emphasized on characters bringing up their own horrible memories to use in acting scenarios.
And use that to propel yourself in the scene. Yeah, and that was truly effective because I bought it. And
yeah, she did really well here. And she's also known for East of Eden, which I think is one of her more famous roles, and Knots Landing. She was in Knots Landing as well.
Knots Landing.
Get on. We got to move on.
Okay, move on.
Oh, as she's driving to Hill House, she sees this house with stone lions, and now she starts incorporating these things that she's seeing into her. I'm going to have an apartment, and it's going to have stone lions.
Yeah,
and she's making this like little fantasy.
Yeah, she's already creating what she thinks her life is now, and then that's also not knowing what Hill House has in store for her.
Yeah, she's just making this whole fantasy life up for her own self as she's driving along. I mean, what better do you have to do really when you're driving along?
I do that all the time. I create my fantasy life. I got some lions.
So then next happens is she arrives at Hill House. Now the gate is up and locked, and this man comes out, Mr. Dudley. Mr. Dudley and Mrs. Dudley. Oh, they're a swell
Don't you love when he comes over to the gate and just gives her that look? He is just completely over.
He's not very
anybody, bothering him.
He doesn't want to. She said, "Can I come in? I'm expected." She says that a lot. I'm expected. I think that was purposely that they put that in to prove I am expected here. I belong. But anyhow, he doesn't want to let her in. And she starts, she goes from 0 to whoa. Within seconds, she starts, I said, her reactions are quite extreme. She's getting desperate. You have to let me in.
And she gets really feisty at him too. And she almost runs him over. When he's opening the gate.
I said, she almost hits him with car.
I'm like, let me in.
Yeah, so
You're not going to hold me back,
She starts yelling at him, you let me in right now. And he's like, okay. And then he starts making all these cryptic comments. These two are great for making cryptic comments, Dudleys. The
Dudleys.
They're like
absolutely. And that's the same thing in fact, in the play and in the book. It's verbatim almost.
Yeah. You almost wonder what they're like at home together. Do they just sit there and make cryptic comments?
we go to the village and no one will ever hear you. Nobody one can help you. Nobody
in
will.
In the dark,
in the night. Yes, all of that. And then, I set lunch at this time, and then I don't do anything else. I don't pick up, and then I leave.
So he tells her, as I said, as he opens the gate, she almost hits him with her car. And then he tells her she's going to be sorry she came. And they says he's the Dudley. And then there's a point of view shots from the car, and it cuts to the point of view shots from the dash camera. And then she first sees Hill House. And then I wonder about those clouds over Hill House, but we already talked about that. And then the windows look like eyes. She drives up. There's a very low angle on Hill House. This is another point of view, almost like her looking up from the car. And then it switches to the camera from the top of Hill House as if Hill House is looking down on her. There's a lot of camera work where it really does look like the house is following her, watching her.
And they even both say, and I think all the characters do, other than Mrs. Markway, is the house, it's watching us. And
he very much
is observing everything we do.
And there's a swirly, creepy music here. And then it says, it's interesting the music that he uses when she's thinking things. The narration music, I call it.
Yeah.
The door opens. The lovely Mrs. Dudley answers. And I wrote, Mrs. Dudley is also very weird. And Nell keeps saying she's expected. And then there's a pan around the room showing the house. And there's a really nice reflection shot from the floor when she picks up her suitcase.
I noticed that shot and I loved it because it looks like a mirror.
Yeah,
I mean, it
really
looks like
the floor. It looked exactly like that.
And in fact, I thought, was the floor that shiny?
I think,
guess,
the
maybe.
floor just reflecting her own image back at her. It's very interesting.
There's a ton of mirror shots in this, by the way.
And then poor Nell, she's just trying to make conversation at this point with Mrs. Dudley. She's walking up the stairs. She's
I don't think Mrs. Dudley says a word to her until they get to the room.
Yeah, no. And then I said, Nell also is frightened by mirrors because as she's walking up the stairs,
she's startled by her own.
She's scared of her own
I think she
reflection.
makes a comment. I shouldn't be scared of my own
Right, exactly.
reflection.
But she is. She gets scared a lot of times when she looks in mirrors. And here's an example in this scene right here of those long, dark hallways as they're walking to her room. Mrs. Dudley is telling her the schedule. She's very adamant about her schedule. I serve breakfast at this time.
Yes.
And I clear breakfast at this time. And I do the dishes at this time.
And I won't do anything other than that. That's all that's... She almost says that's what's expected of me.
Yeah.
Too. So there, I kind of captured like garnered that she also wants to set the boundaries and be like, this is what,
she's all about,
like this is all that I'm going to do.
This is what I'm going to do, and that's it.
Yep. And
that's all.
That's what I've been doing for however long, and that's what's going to remain.
Too bad for you. I'm going to be in the village, and I can't hear you, and nobody can hear you. Nobody will hear you. Nobody's
no
near.
one will bother.
She like goes on and on about
I know.
this.
And just like her creepy smile.
Yeah, no, I said she is clearly without a personality, Mrs. Dudley.
And she does that when she's leaving.
And then she loves to say, in the night, in the dark. She loves to say these things. Then she smiles. She is lit interestingly to make her look really creepy.
And she does.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And then I wrote, I like the camera zoom into Nell to close up and then the pan around her. And it seems like the camera is watching her and the atonal spooky music, lots of low angles. And then she opens the connecting door to the bathroom and there's
Theo.
another woman, but it turns out to be Theo, and they come and introduce yourselves, and in the meantime, Mrs. Dudley is saying her same spiel. I serve at this time, and
she's a broken record.
And meanwhile, the whole time that she's saying her spiel, Nell and Theo are just talking amongst themselves. They're not paying any attention to Mrs. Dudley. I did read that Robert Weiss really wanted a lot of overlapping dialogue. He wanted the characters to step on each other's lines in a way.
Which I like that because it almost creates an unease or like a franticness to them.
I think that, I think that was why. Yeah, it creates like a chaotic sense, especially in this scene where Mrs. Dudley is saying her little spiel and they're talking together and it's everybody's talking over each other. It does give you a very chaotic feel. And then I said, at the door, Mrs. Dudley gets to say her in the night, in the dark bit again. Because she so loves that. In the night, in the dark.
The actress is probably thinking, this is amazing. I just have to say the same line.
The actress who played Mrs. Dudley is...
Boy, did she look
Rosalie
the part.
This is a great name. Rosalie Crutchley.
Crutchley.
Yes, sounds... I believe she was probably British.
Yeah, Rosalie Crutchley.
Okay, and then... Nell and Theo are very friendly. Great friends, like sisters. Now, that's said more than once. And that's where I get
in the play, it's also like cousins.
And it's funny, I think that it's in the book, too. I think it's funny that they changed it to sisters. It almost gives that... It almost like goes with that...
And meanwhile, her other sister, her birth sister, was so terrible to her. So maybe in a way, they're saying there's a contrast there. Like, here's your sister here at Hill House.
I also thought it was sort of lesbian slang, too.
That's true. I didn't think about that.
Well, yeah, since they were emphasizing that so strongly. As a matter of fact, Theo is played by Claire Bloom. She is a British actress. She is of Russian Jewish heritage. Her parents on both sides immigrated from Russia, now the Belarus area. As a child in World War II, her mother brought her to the States for a couple of years to escape the war and the bombing, and she became seriously interested in acting while staying in New York during this time. She would return to Britain, had great success in British theater, and would have a passionate affair with Richard Burton, who at the time was married to his first wife, Sybil.
Okay.
Not Elizabeth Taylor.
Not Elizabeth Taylor.
You never know. It said he had a long-term affair with her. Despite relatively little film experience, Bloom was chosen by Charlie Chaplin to star in his film Limelight, which made her an international film star. She was very successful in film and television, though preferred to remain in Britain over Hollywood. She was married to Rod Steiger, and she is still acting to this day and is 93 years old.
Oh, my goodness. She's still acting, too. Yeah. She's very exotic looking. Yeah. She's beautiful.
Well, she's
and
Russian.
What I thought was really neat was sometimes the actress who played Nell again, Julie, she would look not homely at all, but just like very
girl next door.
Girl next door. But then you would have the contrast.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like now Theo. I feel like Theo looks very sophisticated, worldly. Yeah,
and her wardrobe too.
Yeah. Oh well, that was
wow.
her, yeah.
She had such
the Maud lady. Mary Quant or whatever her name was.
Yeah.
She's also known for the Brothers Karamazov.
That's a great.
I got through that one.
Oh
good,
yeah, you did actually.
Yeah.
That was really
Clash of the
I'm
Titans,
impressed.
and she was in The King's Speech.
Okay, so Clash of the Titans is one I love that.
Yeah, she was in quite
That movie.
a lot of films. She's quite a good actress. I thought she did a really nice job with Theo. I thought she reminded me of what I would think the Theo was in the book. Very cool, very kind of sarcastic.
The Theo in the play and the book, I envisioned to be exotic and sort of very,
Very worldly,
aristocratic.
sophisticated.
But also, she's a little more playful and more flirty. But
really?
with Luke. And that's, again, the
And Luke,
difference
yeah.
between. But I feel like she gets a little flirty sometimes with
Nell.
Nell. And in the book and play, it's Theo that is comforting Nell when it's the pounding. And in the movie, it's the opposite.
Yeah, you're right. That's true. But yeah, it also, Theo has this little nasty side to her where she takes little digs at Nell all the time. She takes digs at Markaway too, actually. Throughout
Yeah,
the film.
she does.
And she took a dig at Luke. Remember, she said he was the dog.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Anyhow, I said the camera really makes it look like they're watching Nell. It does. It really looks like that. The way the camera follows her around. This is when Theo and Nell are lost in the hall. It's very dark except the light on their faces, and then they're in that cold spot. That's when they start saying the house is alive. Theo says the house is calling Nell. Nell backs up. This camera, then it sort of zooms
and it
in and
does
out.
that whole
it almost does
effect
that
again.
dolly zoom like in
The dolly
Vertigo in
zoom,
a way,
yeah.
but not as dramatic, I don't think, as that. And then the light goes up. And then,
Do you know what I thought about with that camera? I thought about it almost as like a heartbeat. Go
yeah.
boom,
Oh,
boom.
well, yeah, you're right. It was kind of like that. It was
And
very much.
and if the house is doing that, then the house is
It's a really interesting shot.
It's
and
almost
it-
like the telltale heart. But
yeah, it gives you
not.
this like I said, these shots all give you this very psychological sense to the thing. It's so well done. This is the way you do horror. Okay, seriously, Kenneth Branagh, you can do horror like this. You don't have to be so obvious, like in The Haunting of Venice. You don't have to make tricky shots for no reason at all.
We just watched that, and I even said to Rick,
almost gave me a
I was
headache.
real disappointed.
much.
It is.
Like this is how you do it.
Kenneth Branagh, if you're listening, this is how you do it.
Kenneth, you're a British actor. Come on.
Haven't you seen Robert
Yeah.
Weiss's The Haunting?
Yeah, here.
Anyhow.
Replicate this.
Yeah. And then the light goes out. It's very dramatic. And then, boom, the light comes on. And there's Dr. Markway standing in the doorway. Good old Dr. Markway. Oh, he's so intense. I love his eyes in this. They said Robert Weiss told him to never move his eyes.
He didn't, and that's very.
He was instructed.
That's almost very contrary to what Nell, she does, and Theo. So Julie is more
Looking all
darting
over,
around,
yeah.
and her eyes are darting, but he's super intense with his eyes. In
Yeah,
fact, I don't think they ever really
No, and I think
waver
it conveys
from whatever position they're in.
It sort of conveys a sense of both. He's more calm and collected than them. Like it always seems like he's even when all these crazy things are happening, he seems to kind of still be in charge and stuff like that. Like there's not a lot of panic from him or anything like that. And also he's just very intense when he talks to Nell as well.
And what I think is different too, that it's interesting to me, is how his character, Dr. Markway, is more almost not flirty, but almost wants to take Nell in an embrace in a way to comfort her. But then if it turned into something else, I almost feel like that could happen.
Oh, totally, yeah.
And that's not the dynamic at all.
No, not in the book. Definitely not.
Or the
I
play.
agree. I think Dr. Markaway flat out does flirt with her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he's more of a father figure in the other versions.
Agree. And he's
versus,
definitely more of a love interest in this.
correct.
Yes. And then when the door opens so dramatically and he's standing there, he says, oh, well, the doors won't stay open. Dr. Markway already makes the mood lighter. The girls aren't as scared anymore. And then it says already some little flirting between Dr. Markway and Nell. Then they all go in the room. Their room shots are really nice. They'll go from all these different angles. They'll go to a long shot to the room. Then they'll cut to the three of them. And then they'll cut to a close up.
There's a couple of shots too, like through the harp. When there was a harp in the room, you see kind of the, And I thought those are very brilliant. I love those kind of interesting shots because it creates, in my mind, so much more, intensity of what's happening in that moment. And then, having you then go to the emotion of the character. In the
and
scene.
there's some sort of, there's a little bit of symbolism. Why is he behind the harp? Almost like he's doing something wrong. He's in jail, something like that.
Ooh.
He says all the house angles are off and that's why the doors close by themselves. And then it says, Theo doesn't like the banter between Dr. Markaway and Nell.
No.
She's a little
in fact,
jealous.
She's a little jelly.
She's
She's a little jelly there.
Little jelly. And then Nell, this is an interesting statement. Nell says all the doors make her think of the lady or the tiger. And for those who don't know what that is, that was a short story by Frank Stockton about an ancient system of justice where an accused has to choose between two doors. Behind one door is a lady, supposedly, I assume, a beautiful lady that he can go off. That means he's innocent. He can go off with this lady. And behind the other door is a tiger. That means he's guilty and the tiger eats him immediately.
So is it kind of like flipping a coin, or like behind door number one is
the lady?
We don't know.
And this is the tiger. Yep.
Yeah.
You're
But
either-
which one's door number one? We don't know. And which is door number 100 in Hill House? There's enough of them.
Yeah,
And
but that's what she
maybe that's the nursery door.
Oh,
Door
the
number
nursery.
2 is the nursery door.
The nursery is...
I know.
Dining room is very well lit, and then as they're coming in, here comes our Luke into the room,
yeah.
always making a
Luke.
martini. He's always so flippant and silly and shallow, and I
I find him super annoying.
It's
in
super
in the
annoying.
film, like, and not in the play at all.
No,
Because
and not in the
and the
book.
actor that played that part in the one that I was a part of, he was brilliant, and he was just charismatic and just.
it's supposed to be very handsome,
very handsome, very
dashing,
debonair,
charming.
charming.
Yeah,
all those
exactly.
things.
And he is not any of those things. He is just really silly and annoying. But they did say that they made that character more flippant than in the book on purpose. I guess maybe to contrast against Dr. Markaway, who's so serious. If you look at the four main characters, they each contrast each other. Dr. Markaway and Luke contrast. Dr. Markaway, so serious, Luke's so flippant. Nell and Theo contrast. Nell's so anxious and wound up, and Theo's so collected and calm and sophisticated. They're just all contrasts of each other.
And they say that a strong emotional piece, or even anything that's effective in terms of theater, film, whatever art you might be talking about, contrast is where you really get.
Yeah, and it's beautifully done in this particular film. And even if we do have to deal with Luke's annoying character, who's played by Russ Tamblyn. This is our last person we're going to talk about. Nominated for 1 Oscar. He was nominated for Best Supporting Actor in Peyton's Place. Russ got involved with gymnastics and acrobatics as a child. During this time, he would perform in local clubs with a variety of acts, including acrobatics, magic, dancing, juggling, and singing. He could do all these things.
More of that.
Yeah. He began in films in his teens, and he was able to work steadily in the 1950s before getting his breakout role in Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. In the 1960s, he found he was getting less leading roles, but would turn his attention to art. He was also a talented artist and would continue working in television and films until 2018, his last role being Dr. Montague in the television film The Haunting of Hill House.
Okay, so now you know what's interesting that you say that. I have watched a couple of episodes of that, and I didn't even really make any correlation.
Well, yeah, he's much older now.
But let me just put it to you this way. I guess the years have been good for him because he's found, and maybe he was directed to be super annoying, to be super.
They did say
the sarcasm. But Dr. Montague's just a cool, collected person. Like, you have to be able to pull that off, or else it's not going to work. And
yeah,
good for him.
Oh, his daughter, Amber Tamblyn, is also a well-known actress.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even put 2 and 2 together.
That's his daughter. They worked on numerous films together, as well as he was also did General Hospital with Amber. He is still alive at 89. He's known for, of course, West Side Story, Father of the Bride, and he was also in Django Unchained.
Okay.
Son of the Gunfighter.
Son of a gunfighter.
But yeah, we'll give Russ Tamblyn the benefit of the doubt that he's playing the character the way he was directed to. But I just still have this feeling of him being miscast.
It still irks me a little bit.
I just don't think this was the role for him. I think he should have stuck with his instincts that this wasn't the role for him. He is really annoying in this film. Now,
why did the house take him? Oh wait, never mind. He's going to eventually have the house because he's going to inherit it.
He deserves the house. I hope that same thing happens to his character as that happened to everybody else. Nell asks if there's any more people coming, and the camera zooms in to frame this. When she asks that question, it's interesting because Luke is standing there. There's the 4 of them. And when she asks the question, the camera zooms in just to cuts him right out of the picture. It's just the 3 of them now. Dr. Markaway tells them that the others dropped out after hearing stories of Hill House. And then they're like, what stories do you mean?
What are you talking about here?
Yeah. And then I said, this is a very interesting shot of Dr. Markaway with Luke with his back turned because you can see his reflection and mirror. There's a lot of these reflection and mirror shots.
Yep.
Where you can't see the actors, their backs are turned, but you can see their face in the mirrors.
You can see their face in the mirror.
Yeah.
So you can still see their emotion, or I should say their expression.
Their expression, yeah. And there's a lot of shots like this. And the girl said, we haven't heard these stories. And he said, oh, that's probably for the best, actually. And then he says, let's drink to our new situation. Nell says, let's drink to us. And then Theo turns to her and says, to my new companion. And it's a very suggestive way that she says this. Yes, it's very suggestive. Yeah. And then right away, Nell says, oh, actually, I don't drink. And I'm like,
I know, which I was laughing because I thought, I know that is the same as the book and the play. But it's funny because when she does finally start partaking, she's like, I love this. What is
brandy.
She? Yeah, she says, but it's brandy, and I think she says whiskey.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if I believe her, but maybe she never did with Mom, even though it might have helped her.
Yeah, I think it would have helped her from the way her life sounded. And then the next thing is so weird, that close up of the fish eye.
Oh yeah,
I wondered about that. Like, why are we showing that? Why do we have this big close up of the fish eye, and then it zooms out and you see it?
And then
you
know that that's what they're having.
Yeah, because at first you don't even know what it is. It's just this weird black.
Yeah, and then
yeah, it's weird. Now Luke, throughout the film, all he wants to talk about is how much is this house worth? What can I get for this piece of furniture? You know, he's all about the money aspect. Blah 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 blah. He doesn't believe anything about the ghosts. And Theo asks, "Hey, why are we here?" And Markaway says, "I'm trying to prove the existence of ghosts." And Theo says, "Yeah, but why us specifically? Why us?" And he says they both have paranormal experiences, and Theo has the ability to have ESP. And then, of course, Luke has to make these ridiculous comments, and you're just like, shut up, Luke. And then Nell says, no, not me. I haven't had anything supernatural. And he said, well when you were a child, rocks fell on your house for days, which is the same as in the book.
That is the same. And happened for a couple of days, when she was, I think, 10.
Yeah, but then she denies. No, that didn't happen. No, that never happened to me.
Or doesn't she say the neighbor was tossing making rocks or doing that?
The neighbors hated us.
They
blah, blah,
didn't
blah.
like us.
And then she starts getting all wound up again. She gets wound up so easy. I said, I like how when the cameras are on Luke and the doctor, you can see the girls in the mirror.
I like that too. That's one of my top 10 shots in the film.
The doctor says the house is sick, deranged, a house of Hades.
Yes.
And then Luke is trying to make other explanations for all these disturbances. Oh, subterranean waters and
oh, that's above. There's a cold area. The Arctic.
Yeah, so silly.
Here.
And then Nell starts to talk about the mother. She'll start saying these comments about mother, and then she'll stop, and then she'll start getting all worked up. And Dr. Markaway's like, well, what's wrong? And then Theo will say all these nasty comments like, Nell wasn't sorry when her mother died. Like,
oh, I know. Yeah. She's pretty terrible.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Particularly at
later
in the dining room. Too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
At the dining room table, she's pretty terrible to her, and then in the parlor later.
Yeah, and Dr. Markaway. This is the first part where Dr. Markaway starts to say maybe Nell shouldn't have come, and when he says that. Oh my God!
Boy.
Nell gets in this desperate, frantic.
Yeah.
No. Please.
Yeah, she's really she's coming unhinged.
Yes, she gets beyond what a normal person would get. And you'd think that alone would make you say, okay, maybe she really should go home. But apparently Dr. Markaway's like, she seems okay. And then she's so upset she knocks over the salt, and then she throws that salt behind
throws salt.
Yeah.
And then I wrote... are you superstitious?
Superstition.
Yeah.
And then I wrote... Theo keeps making these smart little comments to Nell, these little digs at her throughout this entire, like you said. And then afterwards, they're playing cards, Theo and Luke, and Nell's drinking some sort of tea or coffee. And Luke bangs on the table because he's excited about something. And Nell spills a drink on herself, and Dr. Markaway runs over to help her.
Let me help
and
you
she's like, I've got some cleaning fluid. I'll go run and get it. I'll just go off by myself in this house. No problemo. And then she shows the three of them in the room, and they hear the scream come from outside of the room. And Nell's just standing on the stairway. She says she has a feeling, and Theo says, what, like you're being watched? And Nell's like, yes. And then Luke is like, so annoying. And Dr. Markaway is trying to tell him, look, this is very serious. And he's trying to convey the seriousness to Luke. Look, this is even worse if you're going to be skeptical, because you might find out something and be very surprised and not know how to process it. But Luke just does not pay any mind to him. And I like the stairway shot because you have Dr. Markaway up higher on the step, and there's a lower angle on him. And then it's like he's looking down. There's a high angle on Luke and Theo, like a point of view from
It's almost like the hierarchy is being established.
That's what It's interesting the way they do that. And there's a lot of cross-cutting close-ups here as well. He gives them the forms to fill out. Luke is still telling silly jokes. And Theo tells Nell, you can come to my room if you're nervous. And there's a lot of the way she says things are very suggestive. And then she mentions, aren't you thinking of changing your hair? And Nell's like, I was thinking of that, and I wonder if this is supposed to be like a showcase of Theo's ESP, because she says this several times.
I was wondering that too, because at first I thought maybe she's just saying that to her, like, "Hey, girl, you need a new hairstyle." Like,
but she does this
and let me just
times.
put that in your head.
Yeah.
But then I think maybe she was possibly reading her thoughts.
Yeah, and she does this several times. This is not the first time. There's other times when she said, "Didn't you bring new clothes with you?" Remember?
And she said, "Yes, I did.
You know?
How could you know?"
Yeah, I think they're trying to establish, I believe. It's so cool the way they do the angles. Nell's in bed. They have a shot from overhead. Then it'll be on the side view of her. Then it'll be a close-up on her face.
I wonder how many camera setups they had. I'd love to know. I mean, a lot.
They had to have a lot. For a low budget, too. I don't know how they did that.
They must have done those in record time.
Either
because,
that,
again, having like
took each shot bit by bit and then threw
because
them together.
Who was the director of photography again?
The Bolton.
Yeah. He was probably given specific instructions, like start here, and then eventually we're going to be here.
Right.
So when we do the edit, we'll know.
We're just going to put them all together.
Yeah, because they didn't have A camera, B camera, C. You know, really, they just kind of really worked with.
I hope
one.
he didn't have to literally shoot them one by one.
Oh,
or shoot overhead.
Or
okay,
he might have done multiple there, maybe like 1, 2, or 3, and then down here a couple, just to like. Yeah,
I don't know. I wish
for the sake of time.
It is the sort of thing I wish I knew too. But these sort of things, the way they're showing these different angles and stuff, it really feels like somebody's watching her. They're looking down at her, then they're looking at her. It's almost like it's come down from the ceiling to look
it's like
at her.
Her theme song should have been, "I always feel like this house somebody's is watching me."
You know something dramatic is going to happen every time they show the outside shot of Hill House, because they'll show this outside shot of Hill House. The music gets very dramatic, and then
something's going to happen,
and then all of a sudden you see a shot of the staircase for no reason at all, and then you see darkness.
You see why?
And because it's just staircase, darkness, and then the light flips on, and now she's thinking she's home. She's saying, "Mom, I'll be there in a minute, Mom." She thinks she's at home. She thinks her mom's banging on the wall, but then they realize
the banging.
a pounding. And she hears Theo screaming, and she runs in the other room, and the room is very cold. It shows a lot of close-ups with just the faces lit very well.
Just almost like the two of them and their faces very
and they're
close
all
to each
squished
other.
Together. Yep. Then you'll see a long shot of them in the mirror too. There a lot of mirror shots, a lot. And then it's creepy because you hear the pounding. The pounding is very creepy. I mean, even if you're watching the film, it's loud. You hear this pounding, and it literally does sound like the pounding is moving along.
It does seem like
it's moving. And the way the camera comes along with where the pounding is supposed to be going.
Well, I said to Rick, I don't understand how they can have all these mirror shots too without seeing the cameras.
Yep.
I'm impressed. Yeah. That's hard. That's tough to do.
I guess I couldn't
do it.
Yes,
even
I have
if I tried.
Yep. Then, again, where things are going, you'll see the camera sort of moving along, just showing the parts of the room where it just gives you the impression that it is
the sound and following whatever's causing the pounding.
And then you get this, you get this pounding on the door, boom, 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 and the zoom quickly to the door. And the cutting is very quick in this scene. It goes from
it's very jarring.
Yeah. And then they say this thing is looking for them, and then the pounding starts again on the door. I said there's some Dutch angles here, some tilted.
I think that's one of the only times you see Dutch angles.
There's a couple Dutch angles I saw, but the one where they do the door and they go around the door, and it's very angled in that particular scene. And then you get again the quick cutting between the girls, the door, the handle,
and then the doorknob. When it starts to shake, just very subtly shake and start to turn.
Yeah, that's scary.
And that was a cool doorknob too. I was like, oh. Jeez, it's
very ornate. Everything is very ornate.
It's starting to turn. If you look at it, it's almost like this.
Yeah. And the pounding, again, is really scary. And then you hear this sort of, on top of it, now you hear this sort of woman's voice laughing or screaming or something.
And cackling.
And then you have this nice distorted camera panning the room. I think this might be their 30 millimeter.
Mm-hmm. I think you might be right about that.
Distorted lens. It's but then the cold's gone. So every time the cold is gone, it now means that the phenomenon is gone. So you can follow that during the film.
And then it's almost like the shots become more just sort of
more
standard.
Normal. Yeah, you don't have your Dutch angles, you don't have your anamorphic lens. But then all of a sudden they hear voices, and now pulls open the door, and here's Markway and Luke just walking by, real casual. Hey, what's up, girls?
Nothing going on here. No pounding.
And they're like,
happening.
What's wrong? Why are you guys all upset? And then they just start hysterically laughing. They're like, Cannonball was knocking on the door. No big deal. And then Dr. Markaway and Luke say they thought they saw a dog. They were chasing this dog.
They were chasing the dog.
They chased it outside, and then they couldn't actually see anything. And they said, well, didn't you hear that horrendous pounding? And they're like, no, we didn't hear anything. And so the doctor realizes that this thing is trying to separate.
That and it wasn't meant for them. It was meant
for the girls. And then another outside shot of Hill House. I said there are always clouds behind, and I said I think they're matted. Then you get Dr. Mark away at breakfast, and Nell comes in, and he tells her to call him John, says she's pretty, definitely flirting, and then Nell keeps insisting she means to stay. She seems very worried on this point.
She's also not picking up on that, I don't think.
I think she is.
I mean, not as much
She's flirty
as
with him too. I think she's too insecure about herself to really believe he likes her.
That, or maybe she's just so caught up in her own world
of
the house, because she has become almost this living vicariously through what's happening at Hill House, that he becomes a part of that. But she maybe knows.
You didn't think that she was in love with him?
I think she almost had an admiration of him that she wouldn't know what to do if he reciprocated for real.
Yeah.
So she wants that to be the case, but she also is maybe very inexperienced and naive and feels like she could be hurt.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that. But I think she definitely thinks I think she's definitely interested in him, and I think she thinks maybe he's interested in her. But there's definitely a flirting aspect there. And that, again, was not in the book.
And he's married.
But he doesn't tell her that, remember?
No.
She doesn't know. She says she sleeps on her left side because it wears the heart out quicker.
What did you think about that? Yeah.
Obviously, that means I want to die. And then that's when she starts talking about her horrible invalid mother that she had to spend her whole adult life taking care of. And then Markaway again starts talking about maybe she should leave. What will she do when she goes back home? And she says she has no job, nothing. Oh, she's worried that he's going to send her back. And then now Dr. Markaway, we get some of his backstory. She asks how he became interested in ghosts. He talks about his anthropology work and all this stuff. And then Markaway says, maybe you're falling under the spell of the house. And she says, well, maybe it's not just the house. Which to me meant she thought,
okay,
I'm falling under the spell of you. And I said, very flirty here. But then Theo's in the doorway. She's really annoyed. But it's a nice shot of her standing in the doorway, actually. And then she tells Markaway, someone is going to get hurt and it's going to be all your fault. And I don't think she's talking about ghosts in the house. I think she's talking about
him
and Nell.
Oh, that's, you know what, with all those correlations now that you're making to how that scene goes, I could totally see that as being the case.
Yeah, I think if you watch it again with that perspective, I think that the scene tells differently.
Which, again, is very different than the book and the play.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then here's another shot with Theo in the mirror, and I noticed the mirror's off kilter now. I don't know if it was before, but I noticed it. So. I noticed that the dining room mirror is off kilter. Theo is staring at Nell. Nell asks Theo what she's afraid of, and Theo says, knowing what I really want, while staring at Nell. Nell looks away. Luke comes in, and then he starts saying, hey, there's something in the hall, you guys. Come check it out.
Yeah, he's just like that annoying kid that walks into the room and completely interrupts everybody in mid-conversation.
Yeah, everybody's having these serious things going on here, and he's like, there's something out the hall. Anyhow, they go out in the hall, and there's writing on the wall. It's done in chalk. In the book, it's done in blood.
You know what's interesting? In the play, it's done it with chalk as well. So now I'm trying to remember.
Why
from the book. I wonder why would they change that?
I don't know, because I feel like blood would be.
Oh my gosh, it'd be far more terrifying.
In the book, Theo's clothes were all covered in blood.
I thought it was done in chalk because children write with chalk.
Yeah.
And in the play, in the book, remember, it was not just one daughter; it was two.
That's what I thought too.
So I thought that was so weird. Why would they take that out of the film? Was it not as interesting to have two? I think you could play it because there was a rivalry between them two for the house.
Maybe because they wanted to do the correlation of Abigail Crane and the companion with the mother and Nell, and they wouldn't be able to do that with the mother, second.
With Nell's mother, and then
although technically the other girl could have died. I mean, Jesus. Anyhow, the writing says, "Help Eleanor come home," and then of course. Oh, well, that's not going to make Nell happy. She's going to have one of her little meltdowns. So she goes having a meltdown, and Luke's making these silly comments. And Dr. Markaway's trying to calm down Nell. And Theo comes in and Nell says, Theo wrote that. Theo must have written that. And then Mrs. Dudley comes in and starts
that's right,
talking about the schedule. I'm clear at this time.
I'm clear after lunch directly.
And then Markway's like, Mrs. Dudley, please. It's really like, it's this scene is funny in that way. I mean, just in that particular way, but otherwise it's quite serious. And then Theo says, well, maybe you wrote it yourself, Nell. And Nell says, do you think I want to be the center of attention? I want my name all over this house. And Theo then says, why do you have that new hairstyle you're wearing? Yeah. And then Nell gets really angry.
She gets really
it's
flustered.
Your idea. And Dr. Markaway says, no, Theo's doing this on purpose to make you angry so you won't be scared. Yeah, they actually did the same sort of thing in the book. And it says, and there's a part where Nell thinks, but that's not what Theo is doing at all. That's what it says in the book, but they don't say that here.
No,
and then
that's different.
Yeah, he tells, doesn't Theo take Nell to her room? And Nell again asks Dr. Mark, you won't leave me behind, will you? Well, you're acting like a freaking psychopath, so maybe.
We might.
Everything happens, you start going ballistic. And then, how about this statue they have? And then we're in the conservatory or whatever, and there's this lovely statue of St. Francis curing the lepers, but it's the creepiest statue you could ever imagine. And Luke compares it to Hugh Crane in The Family, and Luke is still mocking everything. And he says that the girl that could, this is the companion girl. And then they say, hey, the companion looks like Nell. And again, you're comparing the companion to Nell. And Markaway says, oh, yes, she does. She's a natural beauty. That's what he says to Nell. And then it says Nell is now thinking about Dr. Markaway. She clearly likes him. Theo asks Nell to go dance with old Hugh, and she goes up to Hugh Crane, will you dance with me? And then she starts dancing around the room with this music, with this eerie, weird, waltzy music when she's dancing.
Very unnerving.
It's so eerie. And then the door goes up.
And then it just it's wide open.
Yeah, and then they leave the room, and then there's a close-up on the companion statue. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, this is so interesting. So interesting.
I mean, just creating that creepiness.
Yeah,
and
it's really quite amazing what they do with just the camera work and the sounds and the music. It just comes together so beautifully. Dr. Markaway shows them the library. Nell can't go in. She says her mother again. It's the smell, and nobody else can smell that. And then he says, we'll write this down in your little paperwork. And then he's like, are you sure you're okay? And then this is when they go to the spiral staircase. And then Luke's like, I'm just going to jump on the staircase. And then it starts to shake, and Luke jumps off the staircase. And it said, okay, this is interesting. So this is, you get a view of the house from a low angle, and then you see the camera pan up to the windows and zoom in. And it looks like Nell is thinking about somebody who might have jumped out the window, because she's sitting there, it could be so easy to do this. And then you get that huge zoom up to Nell, and she's
about to go backwards.
Yeah, backwards off the veranda.
Off the veranda. Yep.
Yeah, the veranda. And there's this very dramatic music. And there's a quick cut to a point of view shot with kind of a swish pan going around the house. This very chaotic. I can't even explain it, to be honest. I can't explain the scene because it's so quickly done, and I don't even know how they managed it.
It's very complex, and I'm not sure how they did it.
You have to see it because it's unbelievable.
It's almost like a 360 degree.
It's like a big swish pan.
It's like it's on a pendulum or something.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, I don't know what they did, but it's quite impressive. And then all of a sudden, Dr. Markaway's there, and he grabs her and he says, I should send you home. You're breaking down. If you are hallucinating, if there's one hallucination that will ruin the whole experiment, that's like going to say, hey, this isn't real because this is just somebody, And Nell says, I'm not crazy. Theo was there too. And he said he's looking at her so intently. God, he looks so intense the whole time. He says, maybe I'm being selfish. And she goes, how so? And he's like, keeping you here for the experiment. And then it's like, is that what he really meant? Because that didn't seem like what he really meant. And then he says that she is the main attraction for whatever's in the house. And Nell says, no, I'm all right. Everything's fine. Blah, 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 blah. And then he starts to grab onto her again. And right then, Luke and Theo walk in, and Theo comes in making her little sarcastic remarks like, don't you two look very cozy here? And
I almost look at it, too, as he's using Nell. He's maybe a little more manipulative than we realize. He's using Nell to try to
bring the
thing out of the house or to solve that.
Yeah.
Because that's what his ultimate goal is.
Have the experience.
Is to find what is causing these
Although
murders.
I don't know why he
different...
doesn't already have enough information with all the things that have happened that he's been a witness to. But okay, I guess he thinks the ghost is just going to come walking out or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and that'll be facilitated through Nell. And hey, she's not half bad looking. Maybe too. I can have a little fling if the wifey doesn't know.
My wife's not here. Yeah. Doctor tells Theo to move in with Nell now, and Theo's like, "Oh, well, you're the doctor, whatever you say." And then
so
Nell gets upset again. It's my room, my very own room. Like the 2-year-old, you know?
She does have moments when she's
childlike.
Just so very childlike.
Yeah, very childlike. But Theo looks really happy. We'll have fun, like sisters.
Yep, but not like cousins, like sisters.
And then this is when Nell's drinking and painting her toes. And I said, Theo's being a bad influence on her. And now she's going to start talking about her mother. She could never do anything else. She always had to watch her. And Nell asked Theo about her apartment. And then Theo keeps saying, we furnished ourselves, and using this like plural term. And so Nell says, oh, are you married? And Theo says, no.
Mm-hmm. And she says it exactly like that too.
Yeah, no. And then Theo starts asking Nell about her place, and she makes up her little story about the stone lions on the mantle. And Theo says, well, maybe you should get back to your apartment. You really probably should get back as soon as you can. Because I think she's worried everybody's worried about Nell at this point. And then that makes Nell infuriated. Why is everybody against me? You know, I never want to leave Hill House.
She has a lot more tantrums in the film than she does.
Oh my God,
in any of the
it's
other
like constant tantrums.
Versions. Yep.
She says she's been waiting all her life for something like this to happen. And then Theo leans in like suggestively. And then Markaway calls them from the hallway. Girls! And then they all come out. Everybody comes out, including...
There is sort of this love triangle.
Yeah. Everybody comes out, including Luke. And he's showing them this cold spot. And the lighting in this is really interesting because it really looks like there's a black circle around Dr. Markaway when he's talking. And just a light. But it looks like literally a circle. It's really interesting. He's very excited about his cold spot. And
they
Luke,
do that a couple times too with...
they do it with
with Nell in particular. Like when she's in the room by herself or when there's some sort of like, it's almost like introspective into her head. So just focus on the head. Maybe that's when it's cerebral, or when it's all in your head. Yeah. That's maybe the effect.
It's really interesting. Of course, Luke doesn't believe... there must be a draft somewhere. Can't be. And then they said, we found the heart of the house. And they show the doors of the nursery. Man, it does look freaking scary. I'm sorry.
It does.
I mean, and
on the outside.
Theo says it's like looking to the doorway of a tomb. And then there's more flirting between Dr. Markaway and Nell. And then Theo and Nell go back to bed. And then Luke still is not believing any of this stuff. And they have this deep conversation about why can't you accept supernatural phenomenon versus superstition. It's actually quite interesting. Then it's back with Nell and Theo in the room. And Nell's talking about the library. Theo says, oh, it's that sick room smell you don't like. Theo, again, seems to know what's in her mind. And she says... I don't want to talk about it. I'm just going to go to bed. And then Theo says, why be mad at me? I don't think you killed your mother.
Yeah. So again, there's her reading her thoughts, I think.
And then Nell gets
projecting
of course, that makes Nell quite upset again.
Yep.
Tells her to go to sleep. And Theo's not very fazed with Nell's tantrums at all. And then all of a sudden there's this zoom down on the book that says Abigail Crane. Just right there.
It was kind of random.
It was almost
in
like
a way.
It correlated with the mother. The talk of the mother.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was.
It's like
I thought it was very random, but I'm sure it had.
It's like they correlate Abigail Crane with Nell's mother. I feel like, and then
because they kept trying to do that because again, it's different from the other versions.
I just wondered why all of a sudden, out of the blue, they did that, and that right there, right after she says, "It's I don't think you killed your mother."
It might be that Abigail and mom connection.
Yeah. And then there's a shot of the outside of the house, and you know what happens when that happens. The outside of the house, and then all of a sudden...
Gonna be some bad things happen.
This is really interesting, this pan on the wall of the room, that sort of decorative wall. Then you see Nell. They're going to keep showing the wall, and then they'll show Nell in a close-up. She's cowering in the bed, and there's a light on her face, and you hear these voices coming from behind the wall. Like, it really shows the wall a lot. Nell's talking to Theo. You don't see Theo. You only see Nell. And she's like, Theo, hold my hand. She's like, don't say anything. And then it keeps cross-cutting to these close-ups of the wall to Nell's face. And Nell keeps kind of talking to Theo, saying, Theo.
I think it's all in her head, and that's why it's so dark around her.
Yeah, she says, Theo, you're breaking my hand. And then all of a sudden you hear this child crying behind the wall. And the wall looks different. Now it looks like it has eyes to me. It suddenly looks like it has eyes or a face.
The pattern of the wallpaper.
Yeah, it's different. It's interesting. And then Nell starts getting upset. I won't endure someone hurting a child. I won't go along with someone hurting a child. I will open my mouth and I will scream. And she screams, stop it. And then the light comes on and it pans to Theo in bed across the room.
Yeah, so Theo's not even close
She's
to
not
her.
even close to her. Then Nell looks down. There's a close up on her hand. Whose hand was I holding? And that is straight from the book.
Yes,
that is in the book.
That is straight from the book and the play.
Yeah. There's an outside shot of Hill House again. There's quite a lot of outside shots of Hill House, just FYI. And they always look very, they always look very creepy. And then here's your harp. Okay, here's your shot of Dr. Markaway through the harp strings. They shoot him. He's behind the harp. They shoot the harp's in the foreground. He's in the background. They shoot him through the harp strings. Interesting shot as if behind bars. Harp is playing itself. Nell comes into the room. They're joking about the harp. Oh, and all these explanations. And then she starts talking about her mother again. This girl cannot stop talking about her mother. It's like, nobody wants to hear about your damn mother. But then she says she's terrified of this horrible unknown thing. And Dr. Markaway says, yes, that's why it's scary, because it's unknown. He said that's why people are fearful when they don't know how things work, when things are unknown. And that's why we're afraid of the supernatural, because we don't know how it works. Which is interesting. There is some deep thinking here.
Yeah, there are some, I think, greater sort of not only psychological overarching ideas, but there's also some undertones of, there's some deep messages too.
There is. Yeah, it's interesting. And now I feel like Nell now is testing Dr. Markaway, because she starts saying, maybe the haunting's all in my mind. Maybe I'm insane. And she starts saying all these things. And he's taking the opposite. No, you're not. Or maybe she was using reverse psychology to convince him. I don't know.
I think that she was trying to.
Yeah, she was trying to because then he's like, no, we all experience things. No, it can't be you. And then now she tells a story about the night her mother died, and the mother banged on the wall and she didn't come, just like Abigail and the companion, exactly the same. She went back to sleep. And it's interesting when she's telling this story, because she's further away in profile and Dr. Markaway is facing the camera. So you get his reactions and you just see her in profile.
I feel like there's something you can do with in fact, I've been in films before where this has been used. It's you do a magnifier and one half of the lens, and then you have the regular. And what it does is it brings, let's say you and I are in the scene, and if I would cover this part up, you would be in like the main focus, but then you would still see me sort of in the back.
Almost like a deep focus thing.
Yeah. It's a pretty neat effect. So I feel like that they could have possibly done that.
Yeah, it's just interesting the way she's telling the story, but he's in the forefront. Yeah, and he's not even speaking. So I thought that was interesting. Markaway says, oh, hey, it's not your fault what happened. And she said, I worried that I wanted my mother to die, that I did it on purpose. And he says, no, you're a fine person. And they're very close now in this scene. And Dr. Markaway says, Eleanor. And then he's going to say something else. And then all of a sudden the harp makes this sound and he stops. And Eleanor thinks, journeys end in lovers' meetings. I'm telling you, she has a thing for him. I think she believes that they're going to get together. And then you get this book that Luke, of course, is reading this horrible book that Hugh Crane wrote and illustrated for Abigail with these horrible pictures that are disturbing.
In the book and in the play, it's disgusting.
Yeah, it's very
graphic.
well.
It's like the 7 deadly sins times 7.
And it's very well described in the book. Again, you get the imagery really
very
well.
Graphic.
Yep. Nell starts calling him a dirty old man in a dirty old house and hope he burns in hell. She's yelling this at the top of her lungs. And then there's a high angle when she says that, as if something's up there.
Like hearing her say this, like how
it's
how
really
are you in my house?
Yes.
Acting this way and
it's
yelling
got an
at me,
almost
denouncing me.
There's almost a threatening feel to it. Markaway is looking at her suspiciously when she's saying this, and Theo is teasing Nell, asking Dr. Markaway if he likes stone lions on the mantelpiece, and there's probably enough room for 2 at Nell's apartment. And then now she gets angry and she calls Theo, you are the monster of Hill House.
So many tantrums.
Yeah. And then Markaway tells Theo, go with her. And Theo says, oh, wouldn't you rather go? And Markaway's like, go with her. She can't be left alone. Like, quit this fooling around. And then she's back on the veranda. She really likes that veranda, I must say. And Theo tries to get her to come inside, and Nell says, Nell's still really angry with her. And Theo's like, what, you can't take a joke? And then Theo's, I don't think she likes the way Markway is behaving towards Nell. She thinks that he's leading her on. And she tells Nell, you're being a fool over him. She says, you're being stupid and innocent to Nell. And Nell says, I would rather be innocent than like you, which I think is the reference to the homosexuality.
Yeah. And or also that she's maybe promiscuous, like both, that she's living this alternative lifestyle. Plus she's...
Yeah, this is the first time, though, that Theo gets kind of upset. She's like, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? So I think that they were trying to reference the lesbian. And then Theo calls her crazy, and then Nell calls her nature's mistake, which I think is a definite reference. And she really has a reaction to that. Yeah.
Ouch. Nature's mistake.
Then after they have their little moment, a car honks. Taxi pulls up. Lady gets out. Who is it?
Dun,
it's
dun, dun.
Mrs. Markaway.
And she's here.
Yeah, so
the wifey doctor.
She just shows up. And here comes Dr. Markaway out saying, Grace. And she says, oh, somebody's been phoning the house all day. They know what you're doing. They know you're here. And she says, come back with me now. And Nell comes up and she's like, who are you? And she's like, I'm Grace Markaway. Didn't John tell you he was married? We're all like, no, he didn't.
Oh, dear.
No.
Kind of left that detail out.
Theo says to Nell, I tried to warn you. That's what she was trying to do. She was trying to warn you, like, you're going to get hurt. And then Markaway says, hey, we're on the verge of a breakthrough here. You've got to go. And Grace is like, no, I'm going to stay. She's as skeptical as freaking Luke. She's as annoying as Luke, too, I might add. She's like, I'm going to stay. Where is the scariest place? Where's the dungeon? Where's the attic?
She's far worse, too, in the book and the play. Because that's the
play,
character
like,
I played. Well, Mrs. Montague.
Yeah.
I played that.
She's like a paranormal investigator. Nothing. This character is nothing like the character in the book. Nothing. She's like, I want to be in the most scariest place. And Markaway says, there's no such place. And Nell says, well, there's the nursery. And then Markaway's angry at her. He's like, Eleanor. And then he
did scold her.
Yeah, and then he tries to tell Grace, don't stay in the nursery. This is serious. This is not something to joke around about. And then Nell gets, starts to feel guilty, and she runs up and she says, no, please don't stay in the nursery. And Grace is like, oh, this is silly. There's no ghost. And she just, first Dr. Markaway says, oh, I don't have a key. That you can't stay there. There's no key.
And then it's like, the door's wide open.
And then they look, and it's like, boom, 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 door's wide open. And that's actually really scary, too, because the nursery doors are open, but there's just blackness inside.
Oh, yeah, you can't see a thing inside.
It just looks like this weird black void. And Luke's like, hey, no one opened those doors. What's going on here? And Grace is just like still making jokes. Oh, look, what's the only problem here is the interior decorator, blah, 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 blah. And then did you see this part? Markaway's talking to Grace, trying to tell her, don't stay here. But did you see this part where Nell comes over to the wheelchair and is patting the wheelchair and like it's her mother, and then Theo comes and takes her away?
Yeah, it was definitely tying it to her mother. Yep. And it was a moment where she was like reminiscing, or where she was maybe being nostalgic, but in a weird, creepy way.
Yeah. And also I think it's when she starts she's starting to lose it.
Yeah, she truly is, I think, becoming psychotic, or, becoming part of the house at this point.
So Markaway's still trying to convince Grace not to stay. She won't listen at all. She basically says, I'm staying. And then you get Nell, and she starts doing her thinking. Hill House wants her to stay. She belongs here. She's doing this whole thinking thing to herself, and she's so out of it that Dr. Markaway comes in, talks to Theo. They have this conversation. Nell's still doing all of her thinking in her head. And then Dr. Markaway goes away. Theo comes up and she's talking to Nell, and Nell's still doing all this thinking in her head. And Theo finally has to say, hey, Nell. And she's like, what's on? And then Theo says, Dr. Markaway wants us all to stay together. Not in the nursery with Mrs. Markaway. We're not going to stay with her. We're all going to stay together
in the
elsewhere.
Parlor. Yeah.
She's going to stay by herself. Everybody else stays together.
We're going to have a little sleepover downstairs and let her stay in the creepy nursery by herself because obviously he doesn't care about her, and really nobody else does either.
Yeah. And then, you know what? Did you notice throughout the film they'll do these shots of these different statues or artifacts or knickknacks in the house that, even though they look very not sinister, like just on their own,
they make them look sinister.
It looks sinister
and they also make them look alive.
Yeah, it's like there would be a nice little angel statue, but it looks scary when they shoot it. So they show the girls and Markaway in the room, and Luke comes in to get a drink, and all of a sudden the door does that thing where it slams shut. That wakes everybody up, and Markaway's like, what are you doing? Why are you not upstairs? To Luke. All of a sudden There's a close-up of the faces. It's getting cold. The pounding starts. Markaway says, Grace, Grace, and Luke says, no, it's down here. It's down here. It's not by the nursery. And Nell's thinking, it knows my name. Markaway says, I'm going to go out there. And Nell starts freaking out again. She says, no, it hasn't hurt me. Why would it hurt her? No, don't go out. And then the pounding's on the door right by them. And the door, again, the doorknob is turning. The door is warping. It's the thumping on the ceiling. It's really it's scary. And Nell's convinced this is looking for her.
I almost look at that as a climax to the house when, this is kind of like the house when, especially when the door starts to buckle and do the crazy thing, that expanding.
The warping.
It's almost like it's warping everything around them, and there's no turning back now.
Yeah.
It's only gonna.
This is the beginning of the end.
This is the beginning of the end. Exactly.
Yeah, and Nell is convinced that the house is looking for her, and she thinks it will not stop doing this until it gets her. And then all of a sudden, Markaway's like, it's in the nursery, and he's trying to get out the door, and Luke's trying to hold him back, and Nell says, take me, it's me they want. And she runs out a different door, apparently. There's a lot of different doors in this. And then she runs down the hallway, and there's some really interesting music here, this sort of screechy music, like metal scrapey music.
It's almost like nails on chalkboard type.
And then you get your distorted camera in the hallway, you get tilted angles here, you get creaky metal scratching, all sorts of clanging noises. This is where she says, the house is destroying itself. And then they have nice shots of like her feet running, like they'll just show her feet running. The feet. And then the long hallway to the nursery. Oh God, that looks creepy. And the doors being like wide open, like
and it
inviting.
just seems like the longest hallway in the world.
It does. And she's running down the hallway to the nursery. And then she comes in, the nursery's empty. It's like anticlimax. Nobody's there. Nothing's going on.
Hello, anybody here?
And then Markaway comes in. He's like, where is she? And Nell's like, I don't know. She's not here. And he's sitting in the background. He's talking to the others. What should we do? And he says, we have to look for her. And then they say, we have to call the police. And he said, well, no, because that will ruin the experiment.
See what I mean?
I know. Yeah. Like
all he cares about is his damn experiment.
Yeah, I know.
Nothing
and then
else.
That's when you see all of a sudden they all fade out to blackness, and it's just Nell in the light. And it says, I'm coming apart a little at a time. Now I know where I'm going. I'm disappearing inch by inch into this house. And we have to stop because we can't do spoilers.
Oh, we can't do spoilers?
Nope, no spoilers.
Oh, okay.
And besides, that'll give people a good reason to go see the film.
Yeah. In fact, I think there's like...
it's a...
50,
we've covered most of the film.
Not maybe 10
There's
minutes,
a little bit
minutes.
left, but it's very... It's very, very... It's worth seeing it.
Yeah, it is.
That's why it's not worth spoiling.
And don't expect it to be exactly like if you have seen the play or read the book, because there's still a couple.
Yeah, and plus there's a lot of the camera tricks.
Yeah,
a lot of it's like they took the end and they just put everything in it. Like they took everything in the kitchen.
They took their whole bag of tricks,
and they just threw it all in at the end, and it's very dramatic. But we want you to see it, and we want you to experience it and enjoy it.
Yeah,
and we should give our ratings, because on Silver Screen Time Machine we do a rating system, 1 through 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. Your rating for The Haunting.
Can I do a point?
You can. Okay. Yes, you can.
4.8.
Oh wow!
Out of 5.
Never had anybody do like an 8, but that's okay.
Yeah, 4.8 out of 5.
Yeah,
because the 0.2, I think there's perfection in filmmaking. This is pretty close.
It is close
for me.
Yeah, I give it a 4.5, and the reason I don't give it a 5 is because I don't like the variation that the screenwriter used from the book. I thought you should have just kept it as the book. You don't need to do that psychological angle. And I don't like what he did with Luke's character.
Yeah,
that's
I would
really
say
my
0.1 for me is story, and another 0.1 mark would be
those are my fusses about it.
Luke, because there's nobody else in the cast that I thought they should have done anything differently or changed what their character was.
Music perfect, cinematography perfect. This guy is unknown. He did a beautiful job. Editing perfect.
Music.
Yeah, acting except Luke. All the acting is excellent in this film. Directing amazing.
Yeah.
Screenplay, but the story itself, Shirley Jackson. This hits all the right things. This is how you do a horror film. This is a masterclass in filmmaking, this film.
And that's why it's kind of fitting. Like I said, I've not only read the book and been in the play, but I also thought this was done in 1963. Yeah. It's still timely now, and it would still hold up to 90%, 95% of the horror films out there that you watch. And it would maybe even
It's better.
overshadow
I
a
agree.
good bit of them.
And again, like we said, this is the way to do it. This is how you do it. You don't have to have your jump scares. You don't have to have your blood
No,
and
blood and
slasher.
gore and guts
You don't
and-
need all that. This
No.
is far more terrifying.
And the fact that it is really a psychological thriller that is a horror film that is really terrifying.
It is. It is quite scary. You might want to not see this right before you go to bed.
No, I
Just a suggestion.
that's why I just try not to go to bed. No, I'm kidding. I try not to watch stuff like this.
Watch it in the
before.
bright sunshiny of the
That's
day,
right.
and then go outside
Not in the night.
in the dark.
In the dark.
night.
In the night.
Don't do it then.
Don't do it then.
All right, we are going way too long, but I do want to thank you so much, Stephanie. This has been a lovely conversation. Thank you for being my guest.
Absolutely.
And,
Thank you for having me. It was a blast. And
Yeah,
love
my
talking
pleasure.
about it. And I hope we'll get to do it in the future.
Yes.
And again, whoever has a lot of money, please
Oh,
put
yes.
it to
Give it all to
PCTV.
me.
Come on, give it all to Wendy.
Give it
and
to PCTV.
Give me a
and
little bit
Silver.
too, if
Yeah,
you don't mind.
Yeah, just spread it all
just
around.
a tiny bit.
Yeah,
Couple
and
mil.
yep, great.
Yep.
So for Silver Screen Time Machine, Wendy's Classic Film Review, this is Wendy saying goodbye.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. Please don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. And please leave us a comment or a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Intro and outro music composed by Heidi Engel. Artwork by Tyler Birch. Produced and edited by Wendy Whittick. Recorded at PCTV Studios, Pittsburgh, PA. See you next time.